Welcome to Only Murders in My Mind, a Random Thought production. Hi, I'm Carol Bissett, a crime writer, and I invite you with my co-presenters, Liz Hedgecock and Mike Jackson, each week to our conversations on all things murderous. Is it really Thursday? Is it really 5 o'clock? Yes, and it's Only Murders in My Mind.
Well, the thing is, it's always Thursday and 5 o'clock somewhere.
That's true. And we've got Liz.
Hello.
And Mike. You all right, Mike?
I'm fine, thank you. That chocolate you just gave me went down the wrong way.
I'm sure it was absolutely fine, and there was nothing wrong with that chocolate at all. Was there, Carol?
No, we're having a cup of tea, so if you hear some slurping, just ignore
We
that.
take this very seriously.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's three friends meeting for a cup of tea and talking about something that they really like and enjoy and enthusiastic about. And this week we're going to talk about disappearing writers. And when I say disappearing writers, I mean that have actually disappeared. Some came back and some didn't. And when this came up at our production meeting, I thought, well, I can only think of one. Which
Quite
is
a
the obvious
famous one.
Yeah, which is the obvious one, which is Agatha Christie and the famous disappearance for about 11 days. And she turned up in Harrogate. Is that right?
I believe so.
Yes.
That's right.
And we never got to the bottom. When I say we, the general public of the time and recent, sort of since, historians, etc., never really got to the bottom of what happened. But there is a lot of evidence to say that she was very distressed because she was breaking up with her husband. And I think she just wanted some time to herself. But it was one of the biggest manhunts ever at that point.
Yes. Well, wasn't one of the interesting things that she booked into, was it the Hydro?
Yeah.
Some kind of health
Farm.
spa type thing, in Harrogate. And she booked in under her husband's mistress's name.
Yes.
Which I don't think was accidental.
No.
So
I don't know what was going through her mind, but yes, it did cause a lot of controversy. So I'd like to know what my co-presenters have come up with when we've looked into this subject.
Well, just thinking of Agatha Christie, I mean, you do wonder whether that it was the press that made so much of it rather than her doing it purposely. Because you would have thought, as a crime writer, she could have done a better job of disappearing.
a bit harsh.
Well, I mean,
don't diss the Agatha.
If it happened today, she wouldn't be missing for 11 days, would she? With social media and all the rest of it.
Well, also, I mean, back in the day, you could kiss your kid goodbye and then take off because presumably the servants would deal with the rest of it, or the nanny. I mean, nowadays you'd get done for child neglect.
Yeah, you would, yeah.
And when you think about it, back in that day, the press probably didn't want to find her the next day. There would have been no story in that.
No, think of all the copies they sold.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I saw a picture of the front page of, I can't remember if it was the Express or the Mail, but big photo of Agatha, big photo of car, front page. I think there was something about an Earl's daughter doing something or other, but I mean, she was in the bottom right. Agatha was the big story.
I should imagine the reporters would say, look, don't try too hard to find her. We can spin this out for 10 or 11 days, sell a few newspapers. That just might be the cynic in me, I don't know.
Well, no, I just wonder about the people at the hotel. I mean, if they saw her, unless she took all her meals in her rooms or something. But
I don't. Would she have been, while she was famous as a writer, and so her name would be recognised, if she signed in as somebody else, would her face have been as recognisable?
It was in the paper, though, wasn't it?
Of course it was, yeah.
That's what
but the thing is, that would probably have been a photo of her looking nice and done up,
Yeah. Not sort of dishevelled and distressed and upset.
Yeah.
Well, dishevelled maybe not, but so yeah. So as I say, it's one that goes on and on and on. It's
I mean that's the thing. I mean, one's jacket photo or like website photo is not necessarily what one looks like when one is writing at the computer.
No,
yes,
that's true. I mean, and the thing today, as you say, Mike, people would be. It's very difficult. I know J.K. Rowling was doing some research for her second or third book, and part of it was in Barrow, so it might have been a was the second book, I think.
Was it a strike book or?
Yeah.
Oh right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
I was going to say, how could you research Harry Potter?
that's true.
You know what I mean? I mean,
Yeah,
obviously you could
yeah.
research all sorts of magic and witchcraft. But...
No, it was the second book, and
Yeah.
they were in Barrow in Furness, and she went into a local cafe, which I used to go in on a fairly regular basis. She was in there on her own, big hat, dark glasses, scribbling away on a notepad, and the guy that owned the cafe, I think, what was it called? I can't remember now. He went up to her and he went, "You're that writer, aren't you?" And she went, "No, don't know you mean." He said, "No, you're that J.K. person that writes Harry Potter." And she sort of took her sunglasses down and she said, "Yes, I am. If I make a deal with you, if I mention your calf in the next book, will you not get on social media?" He said, "Well, I'm going to do that anyway." What? Last Resort, I think it was called. I don't think it was mentioned, but yeah.
Do you think that's what we should do as writers?
Yes.
Go into the local cafe with a big hat on and sunglasses.
And hope
And somebody comes across and says, "Are you the writer?" "That's me."
I'd like to tell you, I got recognised at the Edinburgh Boot Festival a couple of years ago.
Oh.
Completely wrong person. But it did make me feel really good for about 20 seconds. A woman came up to me and went, "Oh, my granddaughter's just listened to you give your talk on your books." I went, "Has she?"
Who did she think you were?
I can't remember. She did say the name. And I went, "No, that's not me." She went, "You look like her." I said, "Oh, fine, that's good." But it's not me.
I remember being on holiday in Spain many years ago and sat out on the balcony for breakfast, and there was an English couple nearby who were really thrilled when they saw me and came across because they felt sure that I was Tony Blackburn. I don't think there was any need to laugh. I might have seen it as a compliment.
Did you?
No.
Yes, well, yeah.
Do we need to explain who Tony Blackburn is for the younger listeners?
He's
No, let them go and find out for themselves. That's what social media is all about.
Google it. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So what were we talking
Yeah.
about?
I've got one here. Going back to what we were talking about recently when we talked about poets.
Yes.
This chap, Craig Arnold, was a poet and mystery writer who vanished in Japan. Apparently he was a poet, a crime writer, and disappeared while hiking around a volcano in Japan. He apparently had gone there because he wanted to write some poems about volcanoes. And his last known location was near a remote village, and then nothing. No body, no evidence, just a series of unanswered questions. So the questions were, did he accidentally fall into the volcano? Was he attacked, kidnapped? Or did he walk away and just start a new life?
We'll never know.
And one of the questions that comes from that is, how common is it for writers to become obsessed with adventure and mystery, leading them into risky situations?
Yeah.
So the fact that he wanted to write poems about volcanoes was why he put himself in that somewhat precarious position
in
of
the first
being on a
place.
crevice of a volcano.
Yikes.
Yeah.
You know, it's how far would you go when you're doing research and what have you for a book, and it may just be that it was an accident and he pushed his research one step too far.
Yeah. Well, given that quite a lot of my books are set in imaginary places,
It makes it fairly safe.
generally,
Yeah.
yes.
And I only have to investigate Warrington, don't I?
That is true. You know, careful what time you go out now.
Yeah.
True. Yeah.
Did you say you had something about Edgar Allan Poe? Because I have.
Yeah. All I've got here is he disappeared in 1849. No, sorry, he disappeared and was found dead in 1849. And they don't know what had happened in between.
No, I found when I was looking into this, apparently he was found delirious in clothes that weren't his, unable to explain how he got there. He was discovered wandering the streets of Baltimore, rambling in distress, and he died shortly afterwards, and nobody knows
right.
why.
They admitted him to the local hospital.
Oh, did they?
Didn't they?
Yeah,
Yes,
nobody knows why it happened.
Yeah, but they said that it could have been something like syphilis or gonorrhea or something like that disturbed his mental state.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing we forget quite often. Like, you know, modern medicine can do an awful lot of things, and you know, back in the day, it could be something, which nowadays would be considered comparatively minor because there's treatment for it. But back then, that could really, mess with your life and your head. So.
Yeah. They were just thinking about the sort of, because he did lead a very sort of chaotic life, didn't he?
Also, I mean, he wrote about premature burials and mysterious deaths, and you sometimes wonder whether writers predict their own fates or almost make it happen, sort of thing. But, I don't know.
I hope that doesn't mean we're all going to get murdered.
Well, you will, but it'll be in an unreal place somewhere.
Cheers. Well, I feel great now.
Yeah.
I might just leave.
Go and live in paradise.
Yeah, I've got another one here. Dashiell Hammett.
Yes.
He wrote Maltese Falcon.
I believe so.
Oh, right, okay.
He was blacklisted for his political views. He was under constant FBI surveillance. And did he simply fade into obscurity, or did the government push him into hiding? Did paranoia cause him to withdraw from public life? But he just...
Was that during the MacArthur witch hunt thing?
I'm not got a date, so I don't know.
Because they had a real down. I mean, I read that last week. I read that bit about the Russian writers, but a lot of American writers were persecuted. People that were in the arts, like writers, actors, etc., were persecuted.
Yeah.
So was it the 1930s, MacArthur, the president? I can't remember.
Or was it? I don't know. No, I don't know.
I know they had to watch their backs and.
Yeah, well, it says here he was a left-wing activist and a staunch anti-fascist through the 1930s and joined the Communist Party in 1937.
Right.
So yes, that's probably his partner wrote that he was most certainly a Marxist, though a critical one. So
yeah, and I've got here about a guy called Ambrose Bierce, I think it is Bierce. And he was a journalist and short story writer, and he wrote The Dictionary of the Devil, which I'd never heard of.
Oh, the Devil's Dictionary.
Thank you.
I think I have it somewhere.
Yeah, The Devil's Dictionary. Okay.
Also kind of witty definitions of things.
Oh, right, okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not quite as, satanic as
it
that makes
sound
him sound. Yeah.
Sounds like the sort of thing you'd need to get hold of if you wanted to kill 5 chickens and put a curse on your neighbour.
That's not why I have a copy.
Well, he disappeared at the age of, as they say, around 70. And this was in 1913 when he went to Mexico. He wanted, again, you see, Mike, exactly what you just said. He wanted first-hand experience of the Mexican Revolution because he was a journalist. Obviously that was something that he wanted to go and report on, even at his age. And he was seen once inside Mexico, I'm not sure what area. And then he disappeared and was never seen again. Now, I know in sort of latterly Mexico, especially in places like Mexico City, are very dangerous places to be. John went to Mexico when he was at one of his schools, and it was like an exchange program. And the Mexican school children used to surround the English children when they were out, didn't they?
Yeah, there was students in front of us and students behind us at all times.
In case they got taken off the street.
Yeah.
Blimey.
And all the students, apart from John's group, who went into a nice luxury hotel, lived with other Mexican children for the time. Because when they came over to this country, they used to stay with the pupils. So, but yeah, horrendously. Because when we went to the talk about, does your child want to go to Mexico? They didn't pull any punches. They told us how dangerous it was. But they also said that they would be well protected, and they were. Yeah. So
wow.
He might have just been kidnapped or something.
Yeah.
Going back to Dashiell Hammett, I've just had a quick look, and his disappearance was, I think it was a combination of things, because he'd been blacklisted, he was imprisoned, he'd drank and smoked, he'd got tuberculosis in World War One, which didn't help things, and then when he was in prison, that had a bad effect on his health. So all in all, he just he became a hermit during the 50s, and I think just gave up practically. So sad
and when
story.
you think that there are writers that do that, aren't they? I mean, who who's the writer I'm thinking of? Kill a Mockingbird.
Oh, Harper Lee.
She wrote. She, yeah. She wrote that book back in 30s, was it? 1930s?
I think so, yeah.
And then wrote nothing else until something was released more recently. That I think
Go Set a Watchman.
Yeah.
Yeah, which...
But she just, wrote a really popular...
I'm not even sure that was a separate book. It could have been even like a
continuation?
Sort of a continuation or even a sort of an early draft of.
Yeah.
So
Why do authors, I think I know the reason, but why do authors who have their first novel that is very, very successful then just don't write again? Is it because they're scared of failure with the second one? Do you think? I mean, this is just opinions, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe with some people it's just, I have this one story.
Yes,
to
one
tell,
book in me.
and I don't, that's it. That's the one I wanted to tell, and that I have, I've satisfied that urge, and now I'm done.
Yeah, because it's not as easy as people might think to keep coming up with a new plot for a new book all the time. And this is a demand, especially if you've got an agent and a publishing company, you're under a publisher.
Mm-hmm.
The usual thing is if your first book's successful, you get a 3-book contract. That's pressure straight away, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So I can imagine why you'd want to disappear if you were under that sort of pressure.
We've talked in the past when we talked about Agatha Christie, where she wanted to kill Hercule off?
Yes, she didn't like him.
And a publisher wouldn't let her because of the demand.
The revenue they were getting from it.
And when you think somebody like J.K. Rowling, when she decided to write the Strike books, she wrote them under a pseudonym.
Yeah.
And whether that was partly thinking, I don't want these books to be compared with the very, very
Which
successful.
Is another example of a disappearing author.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Authors with pseudonyms.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a very good because I know a few people that say if they wrote a book, they wouldn't put it out there under their real name. They did want a pseudonym.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, "What do you think?" And I've said, "Well, that's all well and good, but it depends how you're going to promote it through social media. Because if you're going to show pictures of yourself, I don't know. Does it matter?"
Well, I've known some people who've used pseudonyms because they've changed genre.
Yeah.
So they may be well known for something like Liz for cozy mystery, and then if she suddenly writes something really dark and satanic.
How do you know I don't?
But if you wrote
I don't.
But if you wrote it under the name of Liz Hedgecock, then your readers would suddenly think, "Oh, where's this come from?"
They might be a
not the
little
style.
surprised.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And would it put writers off? Do you think? Sorry, readers off.
I think if you had a complete change like that, then I think yes, it would. If like Liz has got a very strong cozy mystery following, if she suddenly put something out there that was really sort of dark and satanic, it could put them off.
Yes,
her writing altogether.
And the thing is, conversely, if I write this, incredibly dark book, and it does really well, then if there are readers thinking, "I want to read more by this author," and then they go and pick up the book swap, they're going to be a little bit surprised and disappointed. When's somebody going to die?
With blood pouring
When's
out
someone
their
going to draw a
throat?
pentagram around this flipping phone box and get on with it?
What's happened to this writer? She disappeared.
It's true though, because if you've got a favourite writer and then they're not sort of evident on social media, etc., and you're looking for the next boot, you do start wondering what's happened to them. The fact that they might want a year off.
How dare they?
Yeah, how dare they? I think the problem nowadays, I mean, I can remember back to, I really look forward to all the Harry Potter books coming out.
Mm-hmm.
But between each book, there was an 18-month, 2 years. There's a big gap.
Yeah.
People won't wait that long nowadays. They want the books much quicker.
Yeah. I think 12 months is probably the longest.
Well, we've talked about the Thursday Murder Club before now. And the first one, I think Liz was saying he wrote the first one in 2020.
Oh, it came out in 2020. Yeah.
And I've just listened to book 4. And here we are in tail end,
beginning of 25.
And he's got another one coming out very shortly. Yeah. So, in 4 years.
So he's writing at least one a year, more than one.
Because he's got another series out as well.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So, I mean, how many books a year would you get right? Get out there.
Usually between 4 and 6 of varying lengths, but it is. I mean, the book I'm writing at the moment, it's going to have an ending that doesn't tie everything up.
Right.
So I know full well that, you know, when I finish the draft on that, get it edited, send it off to beaters, and then I'll be outlining the next one.
Yeah.
Because I know that people are going to want to read the next bit, and they'll be annoyed with me if I put something else out different in the meantime and keep them waiting.
Yeah.
So,
because I mean, when I wrote the last, not the one that's out now, not For I Have Sinned, the one before that, Higher Authority.
Yes.
As soon as I'd finished it, I thought, I'm going to write something completely different now. And so many people said, when's the next Warren Detective going to be coming out? That I didn't. And maybe I should have done. I don't know, because I struggled a little bit writing. That's why I've given myself a year to write the next one. I've always tried to do it in about 6 months.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing is, your books do vary in tone. The Warrington Detective ones are quite different from the Manor books, for example, or your nursing memoirs.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can see how if you kind of get out of that particular groove, you've then got to get back into it.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. I do enjoy writing them, I really do. But I just thought after that one, I thought, I think I'll just write something light and fluffy.
Yeah.
So as I say, I've got halfway through a novella, so that's a bit light and fluffy. So hopefully that'll be out in the spring.
You do wonder, don't you, whether some of the famous writers that we've talked about in the past may have wanted to disappear.
Probably.
You know, may have got to the point where they're thinking, you know, yeah, this Hercule Poirot was a good idea to start with, but I'm fed up now. Or Sherlock Holmes seemed like a good idea once upon a time, but I'd rather do something else.
He disappeared, Sherlock Holmes.
He did, and then had to bring it back.
Yes.
Yeah. He was in a shower. It was all a dream.
Well, he kind of was going down the Reichenbach Falls. Yeah.
Well, I've got another disappearing writer, Ian MacIntosh, who was a British Navy officer, screen playwright, and a thriller writer. I've actually heard of Ian MacIntosh. Never read any of his stuff. And he was in a small plane which he was flying with 2 other people, and it disappeared over the Gulf of Alaska on 7th of July 1979. So, you know, you're thinking, well, small plane, Alaska's a big place, you know. Probably it just disappeared under the ice and everything, but there are the usual theories going around that he was a double agent and he actually was escaping to Russia.
Oh, gosh.
That'd make a good story.
Yeah.
It would.
Well, you do wonder, don't you, whether these conspiracy theories and these theories come up because of the sort of people these writers are, because they're writers of crime stories, mystery stories. If they disappear, it has to be a crime, or it has to be a mystery.
Has to be something.
Can't have just been an accident.
No. So you know
that's the thing. I think we want explanations and we want resolution, don't we? I mean, that's why you read mysteries, because you know you want to work out who done it, or you know have the detective tell you. I've got an example of a different sort of disappearing writer.
Oh God.
Who disappeared like deliberately at regular intervals. And to start with, she wrote under in fact, she always wrote under a pseudonym, but not always the same one. Ooh, who is it?
Was it one of the Brontes?
No, it was
Enid Blyton?
No. Well, we know her as Josephine Tey.
Oh, right.
But her name was Elizabeth MacIntosh.
Oh.
Yeah, and she was, she was a PE teacher originally, which probably explains some of the more like sadistic bits in some of her novels.
Oh yeah, go with that.
Sorry, PE teachers. But yes, well, she started out, I think, as a novelist and playwright, but she mostly was famous for her plays at that point, which she wrote under the name of Gordon Daviott.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and she continued to do plays and dramas under that name. And I think one of her first plays that was produced, John Gielgud was in it. And they became good friends.
Right.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, she lived up in Inverness.
Oh, right, yes.
And she was a grocer's daughter.
Right. So, did she disappear up into Scotland, or do we never know?
Well, the thing was, most of the time, she was just Miss MacIntosh, the grocer's daughter, who never married.
Yeah, so they thought she...
So she was just, you know...
Doing a job.
You know, keeping a house for her father. and, doing that sort of thing. But every so often, she'd head off down to London. So as well as being Gordon Davitt, the playwright, very, well-known playwright, she was also Josephine Tey, the crime novelist.
Right.
And she wrote all sorts. One of hers is The Daughter of Time, which is fantastic. It's a great book. Probably my favourite one is Brat Farah. And that's probably because, I remember the adaptation when I was at school, and I read it at school as well, because I had it in the school library. And I remember being absolutely astonished that they had this book in the school library, because it was, a grown-up book, shall we say. Yeah. And I remember thinking, whoa, what's this doing here? But really enjoyed it anyway. So what she would do is, every so often, she would, get the train down to London, and she would go to, I think she used to go to Selfridges, and they had a cold storage department for fur coats. And she'd go to it, and she would get her fur coat out, and she would become Josephine Tey, the celebrated mystery novelist. And she would, do her thing in London. Wow. And then, she would go back up and become Miss MacIntosh, the grocer's daughter again. And the really weird thing was, when she died, they announced the death of Gordon Davitt.
Oh, right.
Not Elizabeth MacIntosh or Josephine Tey. So they completely missed those other two people, and, said one of the pseudonyms had died.
So she was leading a very...
Yes.
I wonder if she forgot what role she was in.
I don't think she did. I think she was too smart to do that.
It sounds like it as well.
But yeah, it says she had a fascination with disguises, pseudonyms, and hidden identities.
Good for her, that's all I can say.
But yes, her first novel was under the name Gordon Davitt, and her first play as well, Richard of Bordeaux. And that starred John Gielgud, and it was a surprise hit.
Oh, right. So they weren't expecting it to be an unknown playwright.
So yeah, she was a really interesting person, and she left her fortune to the National Trust when she died. Never married.
Oh, right.
I was going to say, do you think she had an agent though, who knew who she was?
Oh, I imagine so. Yeah,
because it would be very difficult for her to operate from up in Scotland, and get scripts read and all that sort of thing, wouldn't it?
No, I imagine the agent would have.
Known what was going on, and was rubbing her hands, going, "I'm getting 3 lots commission here."
Yeah, I imagine she would have needed to have someone to do all that for her. I imagine because
it would have been very difficult otherwise, wouldn't it?
But yes. And the other interesting thing about Josephine Tey is she's now the main character in a mystery series by Nicola Upson called The Josephine Tey Mysteries.
Oh, I have to watch that.
So yeah, she's an interesting character who chose to disappear regularly for her own reasons, because we talked about quite a lot of people who have, involuntarily disappeared or made choices that contributed to their disappearance. And in Agatha's case, I mean, I don't think we'll ever know the truth of what she was doing, whether she realised what she was doing, whether she realised the effect it would have.
They reckon she had some sort of amnesia, didn't they, and all the rest of it, and a lot of people didn't believe it and said it was just for, to get the press on her side for her next book and all this sort of thing. But
yeah,
you do wonder sometimes if these people, they find the fame and everything too much.
Oh yeah.
I'm just one of the chaps I found was Walden Keyes. We'd go back into the 1950s. He was a poet and film critic. And he'd published several collections of poetry, and a year after his final poetry publication, he vanished. They found his car abandoned with the key still in the ignition, with no clues of what happened to him. But friends said that he had talked about starting a new life in Mexico.
Oh, there you go.
And you just wonder whether some people just
disappear.
Emotionally, can't cope with the fame and the demands.
I was going to say, we've seen that in modern times with like child stars and all this sort of thing, where they have a fantastic sort of childhood, and as they're growing up, they maybe not be as famous and they can't cope with it, etc. And their life becomes really sad. I know he's not an actor, but I keep worrying about our Warrington world champion darts player,
Luke Littler.
Luke Littler.
Because I keep saying, well, he's got all that fame and money at such a young age, but my oldest son, who knows his family, not intimately, but he knows his family, said they've all got their feet on the ground. and his dad manages him and everything. So people out there listening, please don't worry about Luke, he's fine. But that's sort of thing. I mean, though, we hear such sad things about people that were really, really famous, and either they fell out of fame or they just couldn't cope with what was going on. Because if you think about it, they've got no life of their own, have they? Especially with paparazzi photographers and things like that. If they're really famous, it must be draining, because I don't know how they live like that. It sounds glamorous, but it's. I mean, when they've got like helicopters going over when they're getting married, taking pictures of them, and drones going across the lawn to see if there's sunbathing and all this sort of thing. So I'm not surprised. I'm actually surprised that not more people go missing.
Yeah.
To be honest,
I've got another one just to throw in right at the end.
Ooh, yes.
Irmgard Keun, Keun, who's a popular German novelist before the Second World War, and very anti the Nazi Party. So much so that she had to leave Germany, and she lived abroad in France and the Netherlands until a newspaper published in 1940 that she died. Whereas in what in fact she had done, she'd instead forged papers so she could go back to Germany to see her parents.
Oh.
And they reckon that because she sort of forged these papers, everybody thought she was dead. She almost remained dead to the public for the rest of her life. Didn't go back to doing what she was doing before. Plus, it's about reinventing yourself, getting a new identity, and therefore going back to an old identity may seem.
I know when
difficult.
In writing, as a writer of crime, I want to and intend to use people that have been given new identity and witness protection in one of my plots, because I think it's really interesting. I mean, I think it has been mentioned in some of my books before that that person maybe doesn't exist. There's no sign of them. There's no, there's no way they can go off the grid and all this sort of thing. But I'd like to do one more in depth because it gives you a lot of possibilities.
Indeed. Yeah.
Okay, I think that wraps it up for another week. Thank you very much again for your contribution to the whole thing.
No worries. We found quite a lot of disappearing writers, didn't
We
we?
did.
Didn't we? Yes. Yeah.
Well, I wish we could find them.
True, there is that.
And if next week Carol's on her own talking to you, then please investigate what happened to myself and Liz.
Two disappearing writers. So until next week, thank you all for listening, and bye for now.
Goodbye.
Bye.
You have been listening to Only Murders in My Mind, a Random Thought production, produced by John Bissett. The music in Peril was composed and recorded by OM Studio Strings.